Hello, I'm Doug Tibbetts, United States Air Force, retired. We're here at the Dayton Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, and we're standing in front of a B-52 Stratofortress. It's a bomber that type I used to fly from about 1956 until 1972. It's a beautiful aircraft. Welcome to the OhioRAAM Show.
Well, thank you, Doug Tibbetts, for that introduction. Doug's girlfriend swims with my wife at the YMCA, and that's how we got to know Doug. We lunched together once in a while, and it was great fun to walk through the Air Force Museum with Doug. As he pointed out, I flew that aircraft, I cracked that one up, and a few other stories. He has quite a lot of stories to tell, and thank you, Doug, for your friendship and for spending time with me at the Air Force Museum. And this is show number 133 of the OhioRAAM Show, a show about cycling and ultra cycling, which comes to you 3 times each month, on the 7th, the 17th, and the 27th. We missed our last date. Life protruded into it and caused us to have to miss that time. We will get back to that later with a show about the great tour of the Scioto River Valley. We want to always thank the people who make this show possible, the sponsors of our show, Time Stations 41 in Oxford, Ohio, and Time Stations 42 in Blanchester on the Race Across America, and the wonderful people who staff them. Well, you're going to hear more about the Air Force Marathon in today's show because we got with us Paul Korkowski from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He is planning to do the Race Across America in 2017. He's had a couple of delays, and we're going to talk about this. This is a show that men should pay attention to because Paul has had, I should say, prostate cancer, and we're going to talk about that, his treatment and his recovery, and he's all set to go for RAAM 2017. He had another little glitch, which was an Achilles tendon problem, but he tells me that that's all taken care of, and he's on target for being in the Race Across America in 2017. So with that, we're just going to go right on to Minneapolis and Paul Korkowski. And with that, we're going over to Minneapolis, Minnesota with Paul Korkowski. How are you doing today, Paul?
I'm doing fine, Lee, and yourself?
I'm doing well. I had quite a bit of a challenge getting this all together here. A few technical glitches, but we got those worked out. So, Paul, we've had a chance to meet a couple of times here and there. Paul, tell me a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Paul Korkowski. I work for a networking company called Cisco. I've been in technology for a better part of 16 years. Wasn't much of a athlete by any stretch of the imagination until about 10 years ago. And I was visiting one of your favorite spots, Lee, from what you and I have communicated back and forth on, the Air Force Museum 10 years ago in 2006.
Oh, yes.
So I was over 300 pounds at that time in May of 2006 when the last C-141 Starlifter flew in the Air Force Museum, of which I happened to have time on that airplane. So the pilot who flew that in, and friends and family can always say, well, you need to lose a little weight. You're looking a little chunky, and you kind of go, yeah, okay. Well, someone you've served with and gone toe to toe with in a few establishments, you tend to respect that a little more. So the pilot who flew that into the Air Force Museum was a good friend of mine. He looks at me after not seen me for 10 years. He looks me up and down. He goes, well, you've changed. And I looked at him and I said, well, darn it, Mike, why don't you just tell me I'm fat? He goes, holy cow, you've gotten fat. Well, I decided I probably needed to do something at that point. So, believe it or not, Lee, I'm blaming the Air Force Museum and my buddy there that on the drive back to Minnesota, I told my wife, I said, I need to start exercising. She goes, well, you hate running. I said, yeah. I said, but I think I'm going to like biking. So biking actually just started as a weight loss program. It didn't start as, what it turned into, now 10 years later. From May until December of 2006, I lost 100 pounds on a bicycle. Changed my diet, changed my habits, and then cycling took off from there.
Hey, let's since you brought it up, Paul, and you know that's one of my favorite places, the Air Force Museum here in Dayton, Ohio. They just opened a new hangar, and your beloved C-141 has a new place in there.
Yes, it does.
I don't know, had it been in the museum before and just not ever had a place?
So they flew it in on May, I gotta remember now, May 4th or May 6th. I can't remember, 2006 was when they flew it in. It was parked outside for the last 10 years. So it was never inside at all. And I can't remember, a couple of years ago, there was a windstorm or tornado that blew some equipment into the Hanoi Taxi, is the nickname for that airplane.
Right.
Damaged the outside of it. So they had planned on another hangar, but it had been outside the last 10 years there.
Well, I always tell people, if you come to this part of Ohio and have a day or so, or 4 days or a week almost on your hands,
yep.
The Air Force Museum is great. And I've told people, Paul, that anybody wants to come here, I'll be glad to pay their admission fee so they can go. Actually, there's about 18 sites around Dayton related to the development of flying and the Air Force. And of course, we've got the Wrights as our favorite sons here. So it's a great place. Yep. If you're interested in airplanes, to come. We could spend a lot of time. My son from California, stepson actually from California, was here visiting, and I took him over there, and we started through the World War I, pre-World War I hangar, and then we moved over to World War II. And as we got out of it, he said, "Is that it? This is only 1/3 of it, Chad."
Yeah, one hangar.
One hangar, and now the fourth hangar is open, and it's much larger. And the Valkyrie, all the presidential aircraft are there now. It's really just grown by leaps and bounds, and some of the aircraft that had to be put in mothballs or put away are now on display. It's a great place. Well, that's a digression, yep. Paul. Let's get back to you.
That's okay.
So I'm sorry, folks, but do you think I like Dayton? You think I like the Air Force Museum? Of course I do. And since I own this show, I can say whatever I want to.
Perfectly allowed to, Lee.
So back to Paul Korkowski and cycling. How did you get into ultra cycling then? That's a big step from just riding your bike around the area.
It came from my, competitive nature. My sister-in-law loaned me a road bike, thinking that, I would probably like to ride a road bike. So she loaned me a road bike, and I kind of fell in love with that. I could go faster and I could go a little farther. But the competitive side of me came in when my wife said, "Well, you'll never beat my sister. She's been cycling for 30 years. Well, I took that as a challenge. So it took me 2 years. And then along the way, I thought, if I'm going to do the training, I'd heard about these century rides. I thought I'd better try one of those things. Well, that wasn't too bad. I thought that was kind of fun. Now it's grown where, just, matter of fact, Memorial Day, just for fun, I went out and did a double century, even though medically I probably am right on the edge of whether I should do that or not. But to me, it's one of those things where I get to be alone with my thoughts and enjoy myself. And after I decided to take on the challenge of my sister, everybody kept telling me about, you should go do this ride. It's about a 100-mile ride. I had no idea that 100 was a long distance or ultra in some people's minds. And part of my going back to the military days, that airplane, the C-141, I've got 2,000 hours flying around endlessly in those things, looking in a hollow aluminum tube for 8 to 10 hours a day. So you get used to sitting on the bike or sitting in the same spot. At least on a bike, you're sitting in the same spot. The bike is moving, if you think of it that way. So to me, it was no real leap of mental fortitude to do the ultra cycling. It was just getting my body there, and I didn't think of it as anything special. I just kind of like doing the long distances.
And I think we first met over at Columbus, Ohio, Dublin, Ohio, actually, yep. For the Columbus RAM Challenge. At that time, you were in the process of qualifying for RAM, but I don't think you qualified there, did you?
No, I qualified in Minnesota in 2013. I was going to race this year. The both things were nice enough to forward me 1 year of eligibility. when I qualified in Minnesota, I did the 400-mile qualifier more on a dare than anything else. A friend of mine, we were talking about double centuries, and I had done a few of them, and I said I'd really like to do a triple century. So my friend who was into ultra running events pointed me. He said, "There's this 400-mile race in Minnesota." Well, 400 was better than 300, so I better go do one of those. I had no idea what I got myself into, but I qualified. I did it in 24 hours and 32 minutes. Yeah, and I had no idea what I was doing. I took half-hour lunch breaks. I had a good time. I had no idea what I was doing. Well, then I decided that, boy, I got this letter in the email saying I qualified for RAM. I didn't know much about RAM, but if I can qualify for it, I should maybe look at that. The problem was my bride said in no uncertain terms was I allowed to do RAM. So my biggest advocate was my now 19-year-old son, who spent better part of 3 years working on my wife on my behalf, saying, and he was one of my crew members for the qualifier, and he saw what I could do, and he said, Mom, I want to see my dad do RAM. So he was the one that pushed, and last year he's a senior in high school, so it was his graduation year, and I told the both things. I said, it's not really fair to my oldest son that he can't stay, he could not come for RAM because it'd be his graduation parties and all his friends. Could I go to 2016? So I actually got moved 1 year because of my son. But I did qualify in 2013 in Minnesota is where I first qualified.
Okay, very good. So you've had some challenges, though, haven't you, Paul?
Challenges would be an understatement, Lee. Yes, I had planned and was signed up, paid my fees for RAM for this year, and started my training in Minnesota in the middle of January. It's not the easiest to start your training, but I did something that is unheard of for a 47-year-old male. I was getting tested for prostate cancer every year. I come from a very long history of prostate cancer in my family. So the week after Christmas, I got a phone call saying, "Hey, could you come in, Mr. Korkowski, and get tested?" There's a enzyme test they do called the PSA. I went in Wednesday and Thursday. I was told, "When can you come see the urology department?" So here I am starting my training in earnest for RAM, and I all of a sudden got derailed with some potential news that I had prostate cancer. Within 3 weeks, it was confirmed I did indeed have prostate cancer. So by 1st of February, I knew RAM was out. I just was now waiting for the surgery date. So surgery for me was March 24th. I actually went down and did the Texas RAM qualifier with the explicit consent from my surgeon 5 days before surgery is when I did the race. He said, "As long as you don't jeopardize surgery, I'll let you do the race." I got to about 310 miles, and I knew if I continued, I would have jeopardized my surgery because I was hyponatremic, and I knew what that would do to my body if I went into surgery. So I literally stopped. I went down there just to have a good time, not knowing what I'd be like on the back end. Came out of the surgery, and 6 weeks later, I'm back on the bike. And 7 weeks after being post-surgery, I've been doing 500-mile weeks already.
Well, Paul, it just so happens that it seems like in the last couple of years, I have had so many of my friends who have had the diagnosis of prostate cancer. I just wonder, and I don't know, and maybe you don't either, but is it more that we're having better diagnostic approaches, or is it something that seems to be growing? Or maybe it's just the fact my age, the friends who are my age, who knows?
Well, it could be a little of all three, Lee. I won't claim to know your age of your friend. Generally, once you get to around 65 to 70, all men have prostate cancer of some form, assuming they still have their prostate. But usually by the time you reach age 70, the prostate cancer won't be the cause of death, because by that time it's so slow growing. But back to one of the three parts, or the three legs that you kind of talked about, the diagnoses. Back in 2000, when I started going in to get tested, my dad being one of four brothers, four of them had it in the same calendar year in the year 2000. I was age 31. And back then there was no history of, or I shouldn't say history, there was no belief that prostate cancer was hereditary, that there's any genetics involved. It was believed to be more coincidence than hereditary. Well, when 50% of the brothers, on one side of the family have it in the same calendar year, that becomes a little more skewed. My family med doctor ordered annual tests for me. So for the last 15 years, there's, people are used to the manual exam with a proctologist is what most men think of. What actually caught it was something that 16 years ago, most doctors didn't believe in, which is that PSA enzyme test. Some doctors are still skeptical, but my doctor at least thought providing a baseline to see what that number is. So 0 to 4 is the range. Anything below 4.0 and below, you're fine. So mine for the last 15 years was 0.6 to 0.7, nice straight line, low number. And this year it curved up to 2.9. If it was ULE that went in, they would look at 2.9, said, hey, you're under 4.0, you're fine. And in the case of the fact that I had 15 years of baseline as a low number and it went up, that was the indicator. But even up until 5 years ago, to part of your point, they didn't think of PSA as a really good, accurate indicator. Things like urinary tract infections, even riding, believe it or not, can escalate that number because you're sitting, the saddle kind of massages the prostate, so that can increase that enzyme level.
So I think it's a good thing at this point just to tell the men, hey, for goodness sakes, get checked. And let me just tell you my experience a little bit. We've had a female doctor for the 30 years that we've been back in Dayton. Always, they all checked until we got the latest doctor. And I don't know if she felt uncomfortable with it, but I went a couple of years and all of a sudden it dawned on me that she hadn't been checking. I don't know why. What I did, instead of bringing it up to her, I thought, there's a problem with her. I'm not going to raise an issue. I just made an appointment with my urologist, or I wasn't mine at that time. I found one here locally and started going in for an annual check. And it's not fun, but it only lasts about 6 or 7 seconds and it's over with. And the PSA is a prick, and that's all there is to it. And so guys, do what I ask the girls to do and make sure you get checked. Okay.
Yep. And to that, Lee, I would add that, a little bit of embarrassment up front is nothing compared to what had happened if you let it go too long.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I don't know why she didn't do it. Whether it could be she just felt uncomfortable with it, but she didn't. And so my solution was just, and I feel good about visiting urologist yearly because we're talking to the guy who knows. So
the other thing I would put in as encouragement is you also have to be an advocate for your own rights. So if you have a physician that doesn't believe in a PSA or checks early because of some family history, be your own advocate. Insurance will pay for at least a prostate exam and a PSA every year, and just do it as a baseline. It may not be comfortable, but maybe, as my surgeon said, who's also a cyclist, thankfully, so he understands the world of ultracycling. He looked at me, he said, Mr. Korkowski, said, you have a better chance of winning the lottery this year than you do of dying from prostate cancer in your lifetime after surgery. The fact I did it early enough, had I raced RAM or waited another year till age 50, I wouldn't have been able to finish RAM. Well, and there's always the chance that it can get outside the prostate too, and that's bad news. Yep. And as for the familial aspect of it, I have a good friend. There was 4 brothers in his family, all of whom was eventually diagnosed with prostate cancer, and one didn't get tested, didn't follow, and he eventually succumbed to it. Any rate, so you're back on the bike. Are you looking at 2017 now for RAM? Yep, I am firmly committed to 2017. So I talked to Fred, and Fred, Fred was gracious enough. He says, are you comfortable with 2017? I said, yep, I'm absolutely comfortable with 2017. So I will be there next year at Oceanside with a grin on my face. No matter what happens at the end, I'll still be smiling because I made it there. He flipped you on for the qualifications then? He did, but I'm gonna do the Minnesota qualifier. Energy-wise permitting, I will be in Ohio, Lee, to see you in September. Crew, I actually bought my tickets this morning for Oceanside. Another gentleman named James McDonald, who works at Cisco as well. He's from Scotland, so he needs a little more assistance in getting some logistics. So I volunteered to come out, both as a coworker and as a friend to help him at least get started. So I'll at least be the start of RAM that weekend, and then watch the start and then fly home. So at least get kind of like a sugar-free dessert. I get a little taste of it, but not all of it. Okay, well, Paul, I want to thank you for taking time to come out on the show, and thank you for sharing your story. And we really hope that days to come you're going to continue to progress. You'll be in fine shape for RAM 2017, and we'll plan to see you here in Ohio at time stations 41 or 42, one or the other. All right, sounds good, Lee. Thank you very much for having me this evening. Well, it's good to have you with me, and the best of luck to you. And we just have enjoyed making friends with you, and we hope that continues for a long time to come. Same here, Lee. Same here.
Well, thank you, Paul, for taking the time and telling us about your journey with prostate cancer. And I hope all the men out there take a lesson from that. Be sure to get yourself tested. It's treatable if caught early, and we're glad that Paul did just that. We want to thank all of you for watching the show again. Today we're filming this down by beautiful Lake Bowers here in the late fall of Ohio. And I'm standing within just a few feet of a leg of the Miami Valley Bikeway, a 380 some mile system which just keeps growing. I am told it's the largest bikeway system in the world, and I have to say with some degree of pride that I had just a wee bit to do with getting this started. Actually, I was at the meeting, I chaired the meeting where the idea of a bikeway in the Miami Valley was born. We want to thank you for supporting the show, particularly with your shares and with your likes. Those are deeply appreciated. It helps the show to become known, and it helps the world of ultracycling to become known. We're contemplating some changes in the OhioRAAM show, changes in scheduling. There has been some challenges presented to my life, and I may have to do things a little different. But we're going to keep on doing it, and we've got some great shows scheduled for the rest of this year, and we even have a couple of shows already in the can for the year of 2017. So keep watching, keep supporting, and thank you. And goodbye.
Music by Kevin